G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Truen. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it. Welcome everyone. Today I'm breaking from the usual format and speaking with a subject matter expert on intellectual property. Thanks for your time today, Devin, from Miller IP in Utah, America.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on. Excited to be here.
So tell us a bit about your background experience on the law side. We've had you on an earlier cast speaking about your wearable tech business, but today we want to speak specifically around trademarks and patent. So that's something you focus on in your day job.
I don't know which one, day job, night job, all jobs, but yeah. So I've been an attorney for, I guess, coming up on about 9 years, and I worked for a period of time as a lawyer for other law firms, top 100 law firms. I'm in the U.S., but top 100 law firms, and so I got a lot of experience there. I worked with companies like an Amazon and an Intel and a Red Hat and a Ford and other companies. Awesome and fun technology. But I love startups and small businesses, and that's where we focus on now, really helping those that are underserved within the business community to be able to get the same protection. So that's a little bit. And my background is on electrical engineering, so I do a lot on software. I do on a lot of electronics. I've done a decent amount on mechanical. I've done everything from boat anchors to things to help pull your credit cards out of wallets to everything in between. So I don't know if that answers your question. That was a long answer to a short question.
No, that does. And with the Miller IP law at the moment, what area do you focus on?
Yeah, so we do patents and trademarks primarily. We do a little bit of copyrights. That one doesn't have as much demand, so we primarily focus on patents and trademarks. But then we've niched down to, we look at not just everything to everybody, but we really look at how do we serve and set up and help out startups and small businesses. So patents and trademarks for startups and small businesses.
Yeah, great. And this topic, intellectual property, particularly patents and trademarks, why is that important when growing a small business?
Yeah, and let me give a level set just kind of for everybody in case they're not as familiar what intellectual property means and what patents and trademarks are used for, and then I'll get to your question. So intellectual property is kind of an umbrella term. So if you kind of incorporates a whole bunch of things underneath, but the primary things that intellectual property refers to are patents, trademarks, and copyrights. So patents go towards protecting inventions. If you're to think of how do I made something, it does some sort of functionality, it does something, that's going under patents. Trademarks are on brands. So now you think of, I've got a brand, I've got the next Nike or Starbucks or Fitbit or Apple or whatever, and I want to protect my brand, and that's what you do. Third one is on copyrights. Copyrights are going to be on creative. So if you think of a movie, a book, a photograph, or something of that nature, a podcast, and those things, you're doing something creative, then you protect them with copyright. So why are those important to a business? Well, a couple of reasons. One is to a lot of those, you take it, whether it's a patent or a trademark, it's a lot of intangible. How do you build a brand? And let's take brands as an example. And for trademarks, you build a brand and you put in a ton of time, sweat, and effort to let people know your brand, what it is, and how why you should go with us instead of a competitor and anything else. And if somebody were to come along and simply copy your brand and start using the same company,
got to pass off as you.
Now you're hosed in the sense that they've taken piggybacked on all of your time and effort, and now you can't even protect it, and they get to use all of the time and effort you put in without doing any of the work. So, and same thing with the patent. If you create the world's best widget and you put in a ton of time and effort, once somebody sees it, it's a whole lot easier to reverse engineer it and figure it out. So one is on the protecting side. You protect your brand, you protect your widget, you protect anything else. One other thing, and then I'll pause for a second, is if you're to think of, it's also an asset. So if you're to look at a company, this is not only just protecting your company, but what can people invest in? Or, can I invest in a brand? Well, if you're going to be the next Starbucks, you're investing in the trademark because that's where a lot of their value is. If I'm build the world's best widget, now I'm going to protect, or it's an investable asset the company can own and either grow or have as an asset or license or for acquisition, get an additional increased evaluation. All of those are ones that really becomes a way to protect and also to get an asset for your company.
Yeah. And from memory, it was the book, The World is Flat by Thomas Friedman, I think, where I read that. It was the 19th century, early 19th century, when IP really started to come to the fore. and add a lot of value, not just to businesses, but obviously countries as well, and build wealth. Is that right? Like the short history of intellectual property?
Yeah, I mean, you can. I'd have to check now the dates, so don't hold me to them. If you're to take really the very first early on of what their intellectual property is, it really comes back to patents, and it was actually to do with salt. And you think of, why salt? But today in day and age, we have refrigeration, we have preservatives and everything else. Back in the day, I think it was in the 18th century, it may have been the late 17th century, 17th century, 18th century, and you had to basically government granted monopolies on who could sell salt and who could own that business and run it, which is really an early form of patents, meaning they basically gave them a patent, say, we patent salt, you're the only ones that have the rights for an exclusivity for a period of time. And it kind of started from that. To your point, 19th centuries, and we even had, I take that back, you had Benjamin Franklin. He was I think a law clerk at one of the patent or PTO, the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. He had a ton of them. So it started probably late 17th century, the 1800s, and then it's just grown to really pick up in the 1900s.
Yeah, I love that. I think it was early 20th century, so early 1900. The head of the patent office in the US made an announcement basically that we're pretty much full up. There's not going to be any more inventions that's going to be worth patenting.
Yeah, that prophecy has worked out well. Yeah, it's only it astronomically increased from there. You think about early 1900s, we didn't have smartphones, we didn't have any phones. You barely had, you didn't even earlier 1900s didn't have electricity. You didn't have vehicles. It's absolutely.
It's a huge part of a business that I think is misunderstood or undervalued. People don't spend a bit of time looking into their IP, one, the risk, but two, the potential asset that can be built up. So I think it's a really important point to be talking about.
Yep, absolutely. I'm biased as a biased opinion, but I think it's one where it can be a great tool, and one that's a lot of times, especially if you're starting out, they don't think about unless you hear the word patent on Shark Tank or hear the word trademark, and somebody says you should probably trademark that, and then you look into it. Otherwise, it oftentimes slips by.
Well, and obviously with your wearable tech on hydration, the company you founded in 2013, that's obviously been a big part of the value generation in that business, is being able to protect your IP there, your ideas, and et cetera. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a kind of a fun side note. So worked on other people's patent, but the very first patent that I wrote from start to finish and did was the very first patent on the wearable hydration monitor. So I was still in law school. I was working as a law clerk for another firm doing other things for that, but not writing patents at that point. I didn't have as much experience, and I said, I want to get a patent. I can't afford this, but I can do it myself, and I know I've got the education. So very first patent I ever wrote, start to finish, was the one for that wearable company, and then it's grown from there.
Great. And do you have any other examples of how powerful IP can be for a business?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I'll take a couple examples from my own life or my own companies. One, as you mentioned, is the wearables, and a lot of when we went to merge with another company, that was a lot of the valuation, because we'd done a lot of R&D, but it's hard to capitalize on R&D, was on the patent evaluation. If you're to think a lot of the biggest companies out there, think of Nike, think of, again, almost you think of Starbucks, you think of Apple, you think of Amazon, all of those, as name recognition. And yet think if they couldn't protect their name, they couldn't protect their reputation, what kind of business? If everybody could start an Amazon.com, nobody would know which one to go to. And so there's a big power in that. And it's one that just allows you to really protect and grow. So I think that there's a lot of examples out there. One of my favorite ones is some of the mom and pop shops that you don't hear about them. They're not a big one, but they're able to protect where they're at and what they're doing, and be able to kind of get their small stake in the sand. And a lot of that is protecting it so others don't say that's a great idea.
Yep. And one thing you think people do poorly in this area in growing a small business around IP?
Well, I think it answers your question, but one of the things that people often don't think about is, especially, I'll take it with patents, is generally, and I'm speaking with U.S. law, I believe Australian law is the same way, but I'm not an Australian attorney, so I'm not going to speak definitively, is when you're on the patent side, so you build a widget, you build something, and you make the world's next iPhone, and the next whatever. The problem is that normally when you build something or for a patent, when you invent something, you introduce it to the public. You have 1 year within which you can file a patent application on that. If you don't file within a year, it now becomes public domain. I mean, everybody can use it. There isn't any protection. And so one of the things that, is often a mistake or thing that goes unnoticed is that, hey, I put this out, and they, have people come to my office. They'll say, hey, I got this great invention. I've been out in the marketplace for 2 years and I finally have the money in order to get a patent. And they're going to say, that is awesome. You got a great business. Glad you built it really good. Unfortunately, we can't help you get a patent on it because it's been longer than a year.
It's a really important point, because there are a lot of time frames around the IP. So it's one of the things I talk with, particularly with startups, that go and speak with a professional, someone that really focuses on IP, to make sure that you get your bases covered, especially if they're in a creative space or an inventive space, because exactly, I think Australia is very similar timeline, that if it's on the market, then it's public.
Yep, exactly. So that's one I think that you often overlooked, and what I would recommend is really never too early to go talk to a professional. They may say you're too early and you should come back, but then you can at least get an idea of what timelines am I looking at? What are the deadlines? When should I come back? And a lot of times, if you find a good attorney, they're willing to sit down with you for 20 or 30 minutes, do a consultation or a free strategy meeting, not even charge you. And so those are the ones that I think are out there that are really trying to help the community, that will give you that feedback and help you out.
Yeah, and it may be smarter for the business owner to raise a little bit more capital, to invest in the patents and the trademarks, particularly outside of their own country, if they're looking at producing a product that can be exported, to protect it early on from day one before you get too much momentum or it's on the market, like you said, for over a year. Yeah.
Yeah, and you hit on that. And I think one of the things on the question comes up a lot of times, should we go foreign? Should we not go foreign? Should we just protect here or not? And the way I typically answer is, where do you think your target market is? Meaning, if you're in the US and you think 90% of our customers are going to be in the US, and yes, we'll get a few foreign people, that's 10% of the marketplace. Well, probably, I'd honestly say, focus your patents and your trademarks and intellectual property on the US or Australia in your case or whatnot. Yep. But on the other hand, if you're saying, hey, we're going to be in the 20% in the US, 40% in Australia, 30% in Europe. I don't even know if
that adds up.
I wasn't adding when I started out. But then you say, okay, now we need to probably protect it in those foreign countries. And so I think when you're looking at, should we invest foreign? When should we invest foreign? It's really, where do we think our target market is, and where do we need to protect it?
Yeah. And Devin, any professional development resources you'd recommend, books, podcasts, online courses, conferences for people, small business owners, to look at around IP?
That's a good question. The problem is that to find a good resource that isn't complicated, that you can break it down onto your level, is hard. I'll be self-promoting for a second. One of the things that we have done when I set up startups of small businesses, I set up our web page that has a section it's under the FAQs, but it's really more than just frequently asked questions that people ask. It's a learning library that I broke it down and said, now I'm not going to take this from a lawyer's answer. I'm going to take it from a business owner's answer. Right. What would I need to know? And so that, if you go to our website at Miller IPL and just look up a lot of our stuff we learn, there's not a lot of good podcasts on it. And I thought about doing a podcast or, something is that information, but honestly, I think it would be too boring in the sense that people, I go through about 1 or 2 episodes and then people say, well, I know I need this, but I don't want to listen about the intricacies of patent law. And so it's one where there isn't just one resource. It's just, hey, here's all the information. Probably, to be honest, your best source is to just go to talk to an attorney. Yep. We have a lot of resources on our website. Don't just go Google it, because there are so many myths and mistakes and things out there that too many people said, well, I read this online, and said, that's great. Not everything online is true.
We'll link through to that page you mentioned on your website. I think that'd be really valuable for the audience, even just to start out, to get a broader understanding before they go and meet with someone and get more advice. Yeah. Want to become the best manager you can be? Check out our Kick-Ass Manager course at growasmallbusiness.com. Do the course, then add your fellow managers for no extra cost. Join the 30%. 70% of people quit their job because of their manager. Okay, we're on to the final few questions. What do you think's the hardest thing for a small business around IP?
2. One is affording it, because it's not cheap. And it's in the sense that there are a lot of things you can bootstrap, and this is not really one of them. And so be able to have the budget. The second one is and I'm going to go on the patent side, is that, a lot of times that you think you trick yourself because you've been working on a product or an invention for so long. You tend to kind of think, well, I'm not really doing anything unique or different than everybody else. And it's not that you aren't. You're doing some things that are very probably innovative and awesome, but because you've been working on it, well, that's pretty obvious. That's not anything really new. And so that's one thing to kind of think about is, oftentimes you got to step back and say, what are we doing that's unique, protectable, different, and is that valuable to us? And then let's make sure to protect it.
Yeah, great. And what's one thing you'd say to a small business owner starting out on their growth journey around IP?
One I already mentioned is err on the side of talking to an attorney earlier than later. Yeah. And then the other is even if it's too early, is get a strategy of how you're going to do that. And strategy plays both into your business. If you ever want to go to investors, or whether it's an angel investor, venture capital, or anybody else, even if you can't, you're saying, hey, we can't afford patents or trademarks right now. If you can at least have a strategy saying, we don't have the money or we don't have the ability to do it today, but here's our strategy. We already have identified, we have these inventions, or we have these brands or these things and this is when we're going to go after them. And this is how we're going to go after them. Having that strategy in place pays off so many dividends of everything from you have an internal roadmap to you have a roadmap for others that may invest or otherwise come into the business.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Gives confidence to the investors or potential investors that you've actually thought that far down the road. And even though you may not have the capital yet to execute it, they can see that you've thought about those risks and opportunities as well around IP.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Great. Well, thanks for your time today, Devin. I think the audience will get a lot of value out of that, and we'll link through to everything on in the show notes through to your website.
Awesome. It's been fun to come on. If I can, and if not, please stop me. If anybody does have any questions about patents and trademarks we didn't cover, you can schedule this. It's freestrategymeeting.com. They can talk with me. They can come and ask questions. I'm available. Happy to answer any questions free of charge, just as a free resource to your listeners.
Yeah, thanks, Devin. We'll link through to that. I think it'd be extremely valuable, particularly because you've obviously got your own business or businesses where you've actually used what you do in your night job. So you can talk to your own personal experience as a business owner. And flick hats between IP attorney and tech business owner.
Yeah, and for me, it adds a lot of value. That's where too often you get attorneys that are very good at the law and have no business experience and don't have any idea how to run a business or even start one. And so I try and offer that perspective of not just the legal perspective, but also the business perspective.
Yeah, awesome, great. And for our audience, we would greatly appreciate a review in iTunes or whatever platform you listen to us on. More reviews means we bubble up higher in iTunes, etc. So more business owners looking for podcast help with their growth will find us.